Okay.
Okay, we're here with Dr. Celia Bergoffen, and she is an art historian, an academic archaeologist, and a professional contract archaeologist. And we're in her apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It's April 2nd, 2012. And we're here because Dr. Bergoffen is the archaeologist who did the dig in Williamsburg on Moyer and Ten Eyck Street, and whose archaeological kits we have packaged ready for teachers. Thank you for hosting us.
My pleasure.
One of the things that I know our students want to know is, when did you decide that you wanted to become an archaeologist? Can you talk about that?
Oh my goodness. Well, actually, I studied art history, and when I came to graduate school, I had a wonderful professor, and I took a course with him on early Mesopotamia and Iran, only because I didn't know that there was an early Iran. I knew about Mesopotamia a little bit, and that's how it all started, but I actually specialize in the ancient Near East. So how I came to New York City archaeology is another story, because after I finished my PhD, I was living in Israel. I came back to the United States, and I didn't know what do you do with archaeology in the United States. And somebody said, well, there's this really big excavation going on now, the African Burial Ground, which you may have heard of, and there was another excavation of the Five Points, which was also going on simultaneously, and they were looking for people who could dig. So I started working with them. And then I realized that I could go into business on my own eventually, but this was after working for several years for other companies, doing research and excavation as part of a team with other professional archaeologists who already were certified. And eventually I got certified, and then I went into business on my own. But that's how I came into New York City archaeology, really through the back door, in a way, from ancient Near Eastern Mediterranean archaeology.
So the artifacts from the Williamsburg dig are roughly mid-19th century, and so you have a skill set where you learn about all of those ceramics and bottles and artifacts, and then you balance that with a 3,000 years earlier 1600 BC, and you've learned about artifacts in both eras.
That's right. Well, some things, for instance, the kits that you have, I mean, I stuck all that stuff together, all those glasses and all those ceramics, and that's something that you learn that's transferable no matter what ceramics, no matter what glass you're dealing with from any era. Actually, we don't have a lot of glass artifacts from 1500 BCE, but, and the kind of questions that you ask also are the same questions, really, no matter what era you're looking at. And really what you're interested in is everyday life, how people lived, what they did with those pots and pans, and what kind of food they ate, and how they prepared their food, how they stored their food or their drugs or whatever it was that they put in the bottles, their wine. These are the kinds of questions that we ask. And of course, as you'll hear later on, the bones also provide a lot of information about what people ate, of course.
Mm-hmm. Now, the timeline for the project, you were over there in August of 2010 for the excavation. Then the report was submitted to Landmarks shortly, I think January 3rd or something of the next year. So,
right, it was a long time.
Right. How does that work? You've done the dig, you now have the stuff, the artifacts.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Well, that's the longest part. I mean, the excavation, it depends, of course, but it doesn't actually take that long to excavate a cistern or a privy. Your students know now what a cistern or a privy is, right?
I hope so.
I mean, you can do that up, you can wrap that up in a couple of weeks. But studying the artifacts, that's another kettle of fish, so to speak. Because first of all, you've got to clean everything. So that's not so. That takes a while. You have to wash it all off, and some things are more difficult to clean than others. And then with the artifacts that you're looking at, I laid them out on a table, and I reconstructed. I figured out what went with what, and I stuck together as much as I could. Not just because it would be prettier that way, but because if you have just one little piece of something, you don't know what you have. When you reconstruct, then you can see the shape. You can see the whole shape, you know how big it was, maybe you find part of the embossed name of the company or whatever, or with ceramics, you can find the maker's mark sometimes underneath. And from that, of course, you have a lot more information from which to reconstruct, to figure out the date of the object, or just to see the name of the company, or whatever it is. So I did the reconstruction. Then I had to photograph everything, at least the things that were interesting to photograph. Then I had to write descriptions of all of these things by examining them very closely, measuring, first of all, measuring everything, describing it. This is a dinner plate. It's 8 inches in diameter. It's covered with a glaze. It's a white paste, etc., etc. Then the research, trying to figure out when it dates, which company made it, and so on, where it would fit in a social context, what kind of people would have used this plate. Was it expensive? Was it cheap? Was it locally made? Was it imported? And then writing that up. And then after writing all that up, putting all this information together and trying to arrive at some kind of conclusion about the home, the household, the people, the period, and so on. So that takes a while.
Yeah. To go back a little bit before writing up, do you remember, can you talk a little bit about the actual excavation in that August? I know in the report you mentioned speaking to some of the bike club folks and the guy with the gas station.
Yes.
Can you talk about the neighborhood and your being over there?
Oh, we had great neighbors. We were very, very lucky. On the corner of Barrow Street, Mario Salerno has a gas station, and he's sort of the neighborhood mayor. He actually owns a lot of property around the neighborhood, and he's been there since the year one. In fact, his father, I think, already lived in that neighborhood. So he knows everybody, and he knows a lot of the local history. And he told us, in fact, that our next-door neighbor used to be a bottle factory. Mm-hmm. And our next-door neighbor at the time was the Unknown Bikers. They had their clubhouse there, and they were very nice to us, too. They were always dropping by and saying, do we need any help? Can we do anything for you? And Mario, at one point, we needed some of those orange cones so that we could keep our entranceway open because we had to bring a backhoe in. He lent us orange cones because, of course, having a garage as well as a gas station, he had all that kind of equipment. And so it was just a very congenial neighborhood, very friendly, very real, very authentic. I mean, it hasn't been quote-unquote gentrified yet. It's still people who've been there for generations, really. So,
although it seemed fast changing a little bit toward the river with the hipsters.
Yeah, towards the river, yes, but not yet in that neighborhood.
Right. Something we were wondering is we noticed that when you found the cistern in the privy, which